Hello and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag, an Italy travel podcast. I'm Darcy Melton.
And I'm Nathaniel Malor.
And today we are going to be talking about some different visa options to almost be wrapping up our segment on visas and how to live in Italy.
I'm very excited. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it because I have an appointment coming up for my residency visa renewal, and I know a lot about that, obviously, because I've been through the process, but I really don't know very much about other types of visas in Italy. But Nathaniel, you have done so much research on the various visa options, so I'm excited to hear about it.
So am I. And if you hear a fun snapping noise in the background, that is our dry line that has once again succumbed to the winds of southern Italy, as we are sitting here next to the door in front of a storm that is brewing, and we have one sheet on the line that didn't make it in time, so it's already wet, and now it's flapping around, which is not really to say anything except for the fact that if you hear a sort of subtle and silent "oh no" from both of us, it's because our dry line just snapped. But we will be talking about how to live in Italy, and it's going to be the Birthright Citizenship, the Jus Sanguinis, or the Jus Sanguinis, or the Jure Sanguinis, I-U-R-E.
Isn't it Jus Sanguinis?
It could absolutely be that as well. Darcy looked up YouTube videos on how to pronounce this before getting started. We're also going to talk about the Golden Visa, which is what they call their sort of economic visa. And then we're going to talk about the Elective Residency visa, which is the technical name for the retirement visa, which doesn't actually have an age limit on it. So anybody can actually apply for this quote-unquote retirement visa. Before we get started, though, we wanted to just very briefly mention that we have a coffee, which is a lot like a Patreon, not an actual cup of coffee. Darcy, what is a coffee?
It's like you said, it's a lot like Patreon, but I feel like it's more relaxed. And with ours, we're not expecting anything. We don't have tiers. It's simply that you can donate $1 or whatever you want, if you want to us. And that will help us buy new mics and equipment for Only a Bag. But we want to be very clear that we do not expect any of you to donate anything. We cannot give you anything in return at this point. However, if you have any ideas of a fun little thing that you'd want in return, please feel free to share that and we will consider it. But we are pretty passionate about not having ads on the podcast, so we're not going to be offering an adless podcast.
Yeah, like an ad-free episode or something.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's like, I know some other podcasts do, like, you get the episode a week early or you get it ad-free, but we weren't sure if that's really a pull enough, like that's really interesting enough. So if you do have any ideas for what, like, you're like, I'd love to, I don't know, support y'all for $5 a month, and the only thing I can think of in return I would ever want is this thing. And I know that sometimes podcasts that are based abroad do like postcards and things. I feel like that is a great option, but it can get a little weird with like, send us your address and we'll send you a postcard. I don't know. So it's just, we just wanted to have a way to kind of support ourselves that isn't necessarily through ads. And we already do have the affiliate links, which we genuinely appreciate when y'all use them. It's like, I think it's a few dollars anytime you use the booking link or something like that, but it does go a long way to help us. It does go a long way to supporting what we do. And we do have all that money kind of put to the side. So when it hits like a certain threshold, whether it's buying new mics or when we bought the pop filters, we bought these little stands, I think they are, for the microphones. That was all bought through affiliate marketing money. So we genuinely appreciate when you do use these links. It helps us so much because it makes it that this is a self-sufficient podcast in a certain sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to our coffee, Only a Bag.
I think it's in the description. It's just
okay,
it's
awesome.
coffee.com/onlyabag, but there's a dash between the co and the fi. It's KOFI is how you spell coffee. Mm-hmm. It's a whole thing. So yeah, in the description, there's a link if you'd like to donate. Again, you get nothing for it, but you get our lifelong genuine appreciation.
Yeah.
And we really, really love you. So thank you.
And just to let all of you know, we have taken ads off of our website. They felt scammy and weird and we didn't like it. But we did add a little banner on top of all of our article and blog pages that just is a coffee donation link if you want to use it. But of course, we never expect anything from any of y'all.
Yeah, exactly.
And just on top of that, we want to be super clear that please feel free to reach out with any questions. Again, we never expect anything in return. We're not selling you any products. We're not selling travel tours. We're not selling anything. We're just trying to share our knowledge from having lived in Italy and traveled here as much as we have. So just, I mean, I was going to say, think of us as your friends. We are your friends, but think of us, if you message us, just think about us as texting a friend, essentially.
Well, I was going to say, because a lot of this started when we do have friends who would say, oh, I'm going to go to Italy in the fall, or I'm going in the summer. What do you recommend I do? And it was kind of getting to the point, not that repetitive, and we enjoyed being it, but it was like, this would be easier delivered in a different format. And I mean, this was, 5 or 6, 10 years ago almost now, I guess. And people were like, you should start a podcast. And we're like, that sounds horrible. So we did it. And here it is. And we were saying all this too, because we're getting pretty close to, we're like mid-April right now. And I think in mid-May of last year, we started doing really steady, once a week, every Wednesday, putting out an episode. And we're almost getting to the 1-year milestone, which feels pretty impactful, pretty huge. And so we wanted to, not that we're taking it more seriously than we had before, but we are certainly putting in a more concentrated effort. And so part of that is just being clear about the fact that we expect nothing in return. This is not a quid pro quo. This is not there's no transactionality in this parasocial relationship. Thrown out a lot of big buzzwords. But no, if you like what we do and if you want to support what we do, we would love for that to be a financial recognition, I guess. I don't know.
I know it sounds horrible, but if you have $1 and you want to give it to us, we'd be super grateful.
Exactly.
If you don't, we're also so grateful that you're listening.
We are the worst at raising money, as you can tell. We are so bad. So yes, exactly. Thank you. And I think that's everything. If you'd like to leave us reviews, speaking of, you can do so at Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify. And our Instagram is not going anywhere. We realize a lot of y'all still do message us on Instagram, which we appreciate. So we realize it's probably best to keep it because most of y'all, I imagine, have an Instagram. And then there's like 8 people on Blue Sky right now. So maybe that's not like the place to go. So we are on Instagram, Only a Bag Podcast, if you'd like to reach out there, or Blue Sky, Only a Bag. And our website, of course, onlyabag.com. This entire episode will be part of an article that I will link in the description. I have to put the final touches on it today, and then it will be in the description, but it's going to be one giant article on all the visas we've talked about, and then some of the visas we have not gotten around to talking about yet. But that's all on onlyabag.com.
Sweet. Are you ready to talk about visas?
I'm ready.
I'm ready to listen and probably ask some questions.
Active listening. I like this. So I'm going to start from the simplest to less simple. Not like complicated, but certainly less simple. Mm-hmm. And the 3 we're going to talk about today are in the title, I imagine, but it's the Golden Visa, it's the Elective Residency Visa, and then it's the Jus Sanguinis, which we've actually already said too. So that makes it easy. Starting with the Golden Visa, a lot of countries had this as an option after the 2007-2008 crash. And I know that like Portugal was really popular for it. I know that Spain, I think, had a version of it. And I only say that because this is something that is now coming up. It's rearing its head because I think they had residency visas. I don't think you could buy a passport necessarily, like a citizenship.
But there are some countries where you can buy a passport essentially.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I think, funny enough, I think Singapore might be one of them, which makes sense. I mean, some countries it's easier, and it's a way to raise money. The reason it came after the crash is it was a way to get foreign investing back in a country, basically. And so Italy has this as well, and it's. The passport, the visa is only good for 2 years with a chance or an option to renew it for 3. And that's it. After that, which is 5 years, you can apply for your permanent residency visa. And then, of course, after another 5 years on the permanent residency visa, you can apply for citizenship. So it's a little bit like it's a stepping stone that just gets you to your permanent residency visa after 5 years, which gets you to your citizenship after 10. And for those of you who are not necessarily attached to Italy, but would like some sort of European passport, I will go ahead and say that Italy has one of the longer wait times in terms of you have to be in Italy for 10 years on a residency visa before you can apply for citizenship. I think France maybe is actually up there, but I think Portugal and Spain are both closer to 5 years. I'm not 100% sure, but I think they're much, much sooner. And again, that kind of goes back to the idea that they're trying to increase their outside investment. And the reason I bring them up is because I know Portugal and Spain are both going through issues right now where a lot of the people who are Portuguese or Spanish are being priced out of homes in like Lisbon or Barcelona. I'm just using Portugal as an example because it's much easier. But they're being priced out of homes, priced out of jobs. There's a lot of digital nomads. There's a lot of just foreigners or like Americans or Canadians or Australians or whoever who had money and they're now like, but for them, $1,000 a month is not a lot of money. But for somebody in Lisbon who traditionally might have only made $900 a month, that's more in rent than they were making. So
they're creating a sudden balloon. situation.
Exactly. So the reason this relates to Italy is trying to avoid that tremendously, but it's still a financial investment you have to make, and it's one of the 4 financial investments, which are 250,000 euros in an innovative startup. You don't get to choose what is an innovative startup, but Italy does. And they have a website updated weekly that says, here's what we consider innovative startups if you would like to put 250,000 euros into one of them. This is, I think, designed to prevent you as a person from coming in, starting a company and investing in your own company, because obviously you have no attachment to the country and you might leave. You have to leave your investment there for the full 2 years. I think it's also going to be the lowest amount of money invested, in the sense of it's only 250 grand. The other ones will go up from there. So I think they've calculated in the fact that you might invest in a company that fails, you might make no money back. And so essentially you just paid 250 grand for a 5-year residency visa.
Right. It's kind of a sunk cost.
It's a bit of a sunk cost.
To assume that 250,000 is not going to be yours anymore.
Exactly.
Yes.
For the next year is 500,000. And that, again, this is all in euros. So
for the next year?
Tier. Got it. And this is all in euros. So that's something to keep in mind when we talk about 250,000 or 500,000. That is in euros. So it's, 275 and 550, I think, right now with the exchange rate. So it's not terrible, but right now the exchange rate is not doing so well. So it might get worse. And this is just for those of you who might be applying sooner rather than later. But for 500,000 euros, you can basically just, put that money into an Italian company. The company has to have at least one balance sheet, so it can't be a very new company. It has to be an established company, and you have to, again, keep that money in there for the full 2 years. And then if you renew it for 3 more years, it still has to stay there for the next 3 years. So
but you don't have to invest more. It just stays there.
Well, once you make your investment, you are good to go.
Cool.
If you have 2 million euros lying around, we have a coffee link in the description. If you have 2 million euros lying around, you can actually invest it into government bonds. They have to have a minimum of a 2-year maturity. If there's a U and an R together, my mouth cannot handle it. I am just there's no way that's coming out properly. So you can invest in government bonds, essentially. And then obviously it makes sense to invest in the longer one if you're planning on being here for 5 or 10 years. But that's kind of the easiest, simplest way that has the least amount of volatility. Last but not least, if you have 1 million euros and you're okay doing something helpful and then not having that 1 million euros ever again, philanthropy. If you invest in a park, school, something that has to benefit the people of Italy, it doesn't look like it can be a wildlife thing or anything like that. It has to be a philanthropic project that does benefit the people of Italy. Then you're good to go, and they make it clear you don't have to overlook that. You have no attachment whatsoever. You write a check, and they hand you your 2-year residency visa. It seems too, you don't have to make another 1 million contribution to extend it. Once you've made it, you've made it. Because the other 3 as well, once you've made it, you don't have to remake it, unless, of course, I guess with the 2 million euros worth of bonds, if you cash out at the end of 2 years and you want to renew for another 3, you have to sort of buy back in, for lack of a better word.
Okay.
So a lot of it is essentially, it's something to consider is and we wanted to put this in one in case there's somebody listening to this who has 2 million euros lying around, or 1 million or 250,000, whether it's as a lump sum or something like that. But it's an easy, the Italian website makes it seem like it's not easy, in the sense of this isn't an easy path. And I'm this is the easiest path you have to a residency visa. You guys understand that there's nothing easier on your website, on your, the consulate website or anything like that. You've made every other thing so complicated to apply. And this is just, seems to be the simplest.
If you are rich, buy it. Done.
And I will say too, there seems to be some confusion on whether or not you can work. You can on the permanent residency visa. I don't know if you can on this golden visa. It might be one of those things where you can kind of do some work, but we're going to get into this a little bit later, but I'm just going to say it now and I'll repeat it later, is that Italy is really catty on people working in their country without paying taxes in their country. And we're going to talk about that because it segues really nicely into the elective residency visa. This is often called the retirement visa, but there is no age attached to it. So I know that some countries have a retirement visa and you have to be over 50 or 55 or 60. Italy's is you could be, as long as you're over 18, you're good. And this also goes without saying, I should just go ahead and throw this in there. All of the visas for Italy, pretty much, you have to be a non-EU citizen. So because if you're an EU citizen, then you don't need the visa. So the student visa, the work visa, the golden visa, elective residency visa, all of these is, if you're listening to this from Europe, you obviously do not need it. And therefore you are not barred, but It's like you're barred from applying for it, but only because you don't need it, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Just throwing it out there.
I have a question. Since you mentioned that there's no age requirement for the elective residency visa other than being over 18, do you have any idea if you can get a visa on your own under 18?
I don't think you can.
Okay. I didn't think so either.
Which is a bit, so, and I think though this also applies for those of you listening who are under 18 who have like emancipated themselves or who are just if you're 17 and you are in college, because I think you went to college at 17.
Mm-hmm.
So you're kind of an adult, you're living in New York City, you're by yourself, you're like, I'm an adult at 17. Most of them still have an 18-year-old requirement. The only one that might be different, and I don't know for a fact, but it might be different, is the student visa, which, as we talked about before, is probably going to be, just I'm reiterating this in case you didn't listen to the student visa episode, it's probably going to be the easiest way to get a Italian residency permit. If you're like, I need to be somewhere else for, I don't know, 4 years, it's a great place to go in terms of it's a very easy visa to apply for and an easy visa to get.
And university is much cheaper here than in the US.
And they teach in English. Mm-hmm. Not all of them, but there are enough courses in English that you will have no problem. So the elective residency visa, the main requirement and the really only one that is important is the fact that you need to make 31,000 euros a year to be here, which is interesting because if you are coming out as a couple, you only need to make 38,000 euros a year, which is insane to me. So yes. if you're just a solo person and you're like, oh man, I make 29,000 euros a year from like, maybe it's Social Security, maybe it's a retirement, maybe it's a IRA, maybe it's disability, whatever it is. If you're like, I make 29, I don't make 31, it's almost worth it to find somebody else to move to Italy with. Because then you only need to make 38. And so that's the easiest one. I think not the easiest one. That is an easy one. The two big caveats. I've been in this country too long. I don't know how to pronounce that word. It sounds so chic. Oh, English. How do you pronounce it? No, but the two major things to keep in mind are, one, again, repeating this, Italy does not like the fact that you make money in their country without paying taxes in their country. So if you're thinking about the fact that like, well, I have a company that I run from home, or I do a drop shipping company or digital nomad, and we'll get into that in a different episode, but that this is a big one kind of targeting digital nomads. They really, really, really want you to pay taxes in this country. So if you're like, no, I can make 31 grand, they will ask you, how are you to make 31 grand? And if you say, well, I can do like work, and they're like, no, not in this country, you can't. And they will either ask that you apply for their self-employment visa, their work visa, or a digital nomad visa. They will not give you elective residency. However, there are a lot of caveats, yet again, that word haunting me, for people who do have passive income. So if you are renting out your house when you're gone, if you do make Social Security, if you do make any sort of like trickle payments, I don't know if there's a better word for trickle payment than that.
What's a trickle payment?
I have no idea. Just like where money trickles into your account. I have no idea if that's remotely accurate. But because I think some people like
the idea of that. I would like a trickle
right?
payment.
Like, because I'm like, oh, I have royalties from this, and I have like my dad has a trust fund. It's not an actual trust fund, to be clear. It's like I think every 4 months he gets $500 from a great aunt who put everybody. It's like, so I'm like, you have these little things that know. I mean, I think everyone has Social Security and the not unemployment. What is it called when you've been employed for a while and then they're
like a pension?
Pension. Thank you. I could not think of that word. I have to actually change it on the website too. Could not think of that word yesterday. because we couldn't even figure out what to Google. I'm like, what is the money you get for working? What is that called? But when I don't work anymore. So yes, if you have a pension, all of those are actually fine. You're not taxed on that. You still pay tax on that in the States. You're good. You're golden. No worries. It is just for those of you actively working, you cannot do that. So again, I just want to kind of, again, target those of you who are like, no, but I can do, like, I do some work on the side, or, I make a little bit of money here and there. That's still a no. So you have to make 31 grand a year without doing that. Or option 2 is you have to show that you have 31 grand a year for however long you plan on staying. And again, after 5 years, you can apply for the permanent residency visa. After 10, you can apply for citizenship. It seems as if, from what I'm understanding from the Questura website, the immigration website for Italy, is if you have 31,000 times 5, which is like 100 and, what is it? I'm doing terrible math here. My God, 150,000 basically.
Yeah, I was going to say that, but then I got nervous about math.
Love that. And this is permanent. This is going in a collection of podcasts. But if you have about 150,000 just in cash, which is, as you recall, that is under the limit for even the cheapest golden visa, but it is technically enough to live in Italy for 5 years. That is still applicable. So you can just show, here's a bank statement that I have, let's say $175,000, or if you're an American, or 220, 240 if you're Australian. I'm trying to do the loose conversion.
I do not know conversion rates.
I just know that it's always more than I think it is for Australian. So if you have that, if you have I have a substantial amount, and whether it's from, and again, I say this one especially for those of you like your mom, for example, who's considering selling her house, and she's like, well, what can I do with this? Like, I can't get a golden visa for selling the house. I'm like, no, but that's enough money to get you to the point where you can apply for a permanent residency visa.
That's the thing. I think we talk about housing prices in the U.S. all the time, but with housing prices rising, if you already own your home or are close to paying it off, and if you sell your house for, I don't know, $350,000, $400,000, which somehow is a normal price of a house these days, that is enough to live here on this visa.
Yeah. And a lot of those too, so also I'm just going to throw it out there too, with both golden visa and with the elective residency visa, you do need healthcare, but the healthcare only needs to cover like the first month or two. It does not need to cover your entire stay. And part of that is because American healthcare typically does not work in Europe. Unless they have an agreement. Italy and America does not have an agreement for healthcare to work, so you do need travel healthcare. Travel healthcare tends to be really cheap in terms of like a couple $100s for an entire trip, or even a month. I know a lot of digital nomads. A lot of backpackers recommend things like World Nomad, I think, does health travel. There's a few other ones. Obviously big companies also have a travel health thing, but it's so much cheaper than healthcare at home. Some of it does not cover, like, I don't know the word, but when you go to your general practitioner for checkup.
Okay.
So some of this healthcare doesn't actually cover like general health things.
It covers more like emergency care.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So if it's something like basically
that
almost all that is emergency care. Yeah. And even like dental, you can get dental health coverage, but it's for like you cracked a tooth, not for if you have a cavity. So it's a little bit funky. That being said, we've talked about this in the health episode for Italy. There are a lot of private practitioners in Italy. It's a pretty booming business, private healthcare.
Are you required to have health insurance for this visa? Did you say that?
Technically, I believe everybody is required to have health insurance for traveling to Italy. So on tourist visa, student visa, elective residency visa, digital nomad visa.
But then once you pass the first couple of months, you said?
Then, yeah. And so they basically say, like, it seems like the elective residency visa, you only need health coverage for that first month. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you then go on to the Italian coverage or how it works.
That was my question.
But It seems like there's an understanding that you're not going to get 3-year coverage from something, because a lot of these travel programs don't have 3-year coverage. They have like a month at most, maybe 2 or 3 months, because it's for a trip. It's not for permanent travelers. So, and I think like you though, you were able to apply for a health card here using your Italian or American health coverage. They're just like, show us that you have coverage in the United States and we'll give you a health card here and put you in the system.
Okay.
So I think there's something like that where if after a certain month you can apply for your tessera sanitaria, which is like the
tessera sanitaria.
Thank you. I always hit the A like really too hard.
Sanitaria. You're doing
Sarà.
a spell.
I know. It's my chance, man.
Leviosa.
Exactly. Wingardium Leviosa. And so we're totally off topic, but I'm loving it. And so yeah, you can apply for a health card. I think after I assume a couple months, because otherwise there shouldn't be a weird middle ground in which you have no coverage, in the sense of like it doesn't seem to be designed in a way that you have no coverage, because even if you, but that being said, even if you didn't, it's quite affordable out of pocket. You and I pretty much only get health care out of pocket because it's super affordable and
it's just more convenient for where we live. Yeah.
Yeah, because we have like one hospital an hour and a half away. So the elective residency visa, like I said, just to sum up, $31,000 a year is what you need to show. Even with the golden visa, though, I should add, you also do need to show that you make more than the minimum thing, which I think for a single person is $9,000 a year, which I'm assuming if you just put in $250,000 into a company, you also probably can show that you have an extra $9,000 in living expenses. But just in case, that's something they do require. And elective residency, pretty much the two big things are you make $31,000 a year and you have healthcare for the first month. Past that is something I think, though, after 5 years, again, you can get the permanent residency visa, and then after another 5, you can apply for citizenship.
And once you get the permanent residency visa, you mentioned that there are some work options, right?
I believe there are. I believe it's kind of, that's when you start entering into this sort of, you can just work, not, again, it seems like there's some funkiness over like there's something on the website. We will, on the page for this, we'll have a list of what is considered a specialized job, or what do we call it in the States? We have like, that's...
I have no idea.
well, because everyone's like, oh, you work in so and so, that's not talented work or whatever. What's the word? It was a big thing during COVID. Everyone was saying like,
Oh,
not necessary, not
but it means necessary.
skilled, something. But that's the thing. They have a list of it.
Okay.
I'm totally spacing. I apologize, everybody listening who's like probably
Shouting out the word.
I know,
yes.
like, can you hear me? So it's not, yeah, right. Essential.
Good job.
Which is, I realize, not even the word at all what I'm thinking of in England for Italian. So essentially, though, it is, funny enough, it is just a list of like chemists, architects, plumbers, builders, engineers, park rangers. I mean, like almost everything is on this list. Everything is specialized, which just means if you're going to work at that job, you need the nulla osta, which is we talked about this in the work visa episode. It's basically the document of impediment, or like non-impediment rather, basically saying if you apply for this job, you're not taking it from an Italian.
Right.
It's a whole thing to keep Italian jobs for Italians or something. I don't know. But then you get 200,000 jobs that nobody wants to work. So that's why they have work visas apparently. So that's fun. This, I think, kind of ties up the elective residence. So we go into the big one, which is the birthright or bloodright citizenship. This is very simple, I would say, but also very complicated because this is Italy. Mm-hmm. Fundamentally, this is Italy.
And weirdly ever changing, I think, this
my
option.
God. Mm-hmm. Isn't it ever?
I just want to, if I can, preface this part of this episode with, if you are looking for a bloodright citizenship, the Jus Sanguinis, I highly encourage you to get a lawyer in Italy.
100%.
Because the country is often changing the requirements and the rules and who is applicable. They move things around all the time. And it's very hard to know as a regular person what to do and what is available. So if you can get a lawyer here, I highly recommend it.
And I think that is 100%. Yes. If you can, and it's not as expensive as in the States, I will say, because a lawyer in the States is just, it's like, that's not a thing that people actually do. You can't hire a lawyer. What are you, wealthy? I'm kidding, by the way. We just watched that movie last night with like Friends and Neighbors, and he was like, "I hire a lawyer." And he's like, "I can't hire a lawyer," but this guy with like money, it's a whole thing. I just think it's funny where it's like nobody can afford a lawyer in the States, but unless they're they make their money off the winnings or something, but like there's no winning when you become a citizen. So you just have to pay them outright. Anyway, in Italy, it's so much cheaper. It's even my mom, who had like $6 to her name when she did this, she had a lawyer kind of thing. And I will also throw out there, for those of you who are not used to how the Italian payment system works, it's very much of the trust me, don't worry about it. Which is all to say, like, you'll have people come and like do your roof or plumb in a new bathroom for you, and you keep asking them, how much is this costing? How much is this going to cost? How much do I owe you? And like, don't even worry about it. We'll settle up later. And then like 8 months later, you get a bill, and you're like, that is either way more than I thought it was going to cost, or way less than I thought it was going to cost. And I've never seen it work another way. But that's just like, everybody has this like, it's like nobody wants to ask you for money until they really need money. And then it's when they send out the bills to everybody. But if everyone's doing well, everyone's like, don't even worry about it. We'll set up later. So I feel like lawyers are a lot like that, at least the ones that we have been associated with. So I should also add, though, just as a very last note, on the golden visa, on the elective residency, because we talked about the student visa, we talked about the work visa, almost every single visa, if not every single visa for Italy, you can also bring your family over. So Italy's very big on like, don't come alone, I guess. I don't know. But so I say that like too, we talked about the family visa. If you are, let's say, in your 40s or in your 50s and you have a couple young kids under 18 and you have a partner, you can bring over everybody on a student visa. You can bring over a spouse. You can bring over children under 18. You can bring over children over 18 that have to rely on you, though. And that, I want to be super clear, they mean like medical condition, not like, it
not
has
just financially.
Just not, yeah, exactly. It has to be something that like they have to rely on you, or parents. That one's a little bit trickier because your parents can have no other children, or if they have other children, those children have to prove they're not in a place to financially support your parents. So I'm thinking like your dad, for instance, you can bring him over because you're an only child, but he would not fall into it because he doesn't need to be financially supported. So he can't prove that he needs to be financially supported. So it gets a little funky, but essentially this is all to say is you don't have to consider this as it's only one of us can go over. It's the entire family. And with the elective residency, if you and your partner, for instance, can make the $38,000 a year without having to work, or, again, you have something, you're renting out the house or something like that. I don't know the math on that, but let's just say you're renting out your house for $3,000 a month, then you're fine. Then you're good. You can come over and there's no worries. So, and you can bring your kids, obviously, but it's for the elective residency specifically, it's $31,000 for the first person. 38 for the second person, and then an extra 20% on top of that for each person who comes after. So it goes from like 38 plus, what is that? Like 672 on top of that, 76 on top of that, 7,600 on top of the 38.
Sure.
So because I'm doing like 20% of 38. So it's like, it goes up, by about $7,000 and then $8,000 or whatever it is. So it gets chunky, I will say. It gets like a...
But I feel like it's kind of doable for a lot of people.
Oh, I think it's super doable for sure. And I realize, I think there's probably a lot of y'all listening who are like, oh yeah, we make more than $40,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, can you make more than $40,000 a year without working?
Right.
I think is where it gets a little bit. And again, I'm not saying, I want to be super clear. There's no like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. If you think you can work on the sly and get away with it, go for it. Absolutely. There's definitely people who work on the sly.
This is not legal advice.
This is not legal advice. Remember when I said get a lawyer? You should definitely get a lawyer. No, I'm saying that in the sense of, I realize like here in Italy, it's just... It's almost like even the tax system is designed that everybody is it's designed in such a way that it assumes everybody is
getting
lying.
Money under the table.
Yeah.
And lying. Yes.
And it's like, so there's and it's changed in the last couple of years. It's gotten so much better, because it used to be so bad that like they would just assume that when you said I made $6,000 last year, they're like, oh, you mean 60? And you're like, I meant 6. They're like, well, you're paying taxes on 60. And I'm like, well, what if I said 0? So I say that too because we know so many people who started like little Etsy businesses and immediately had to close them because they're like, oh, they're charging me a flat rate of $3,000 a year that I didn't even make $3,000. But because you have a business in a certain sector, that is the minimum rate. It has now all changed. It is now a sliding scale. There's this like 5% for the first 5 years if you're a solo it's a whole thing. I mean, 5% tax for 5 years is insanely low, especially because you and I just pay taxes. And I think we pay 15 in the States as self-employed. So it's kind of like, wow, 5% here. What are we doing? Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Birthright citizenship. If you or anybody has ever been told in your life that, we're actually Italian, your great-grandfather, I don't know, Franco or whatever, that was Vincenzo, came over and he's actually Italian. We're actually Italian. I'm only saying this because I am tall, I am blonde, I am vaguely blue-eyed. I do not look Italian. My mom was like, oh, we're actually Italian. I'm like, no, we're really not, are we? This is a lie. I look like my grandfather, who's very Polish, by the way, so that was apparently the thing. My brother looks Italian. He's got the Italian everything. My father does not look Italian, even though his mother's Point is,
I look somewhat Italian, and I'm not Italian at all.
Yeah, everyone thinks you're Italian, but you're Irish, or Irish, whatever.
A long time ago, my
descended,
people were Irish.
Super American at this point.
Yeah.
And no, so this is all to say is if people have been telling you that your entire life, like they told me my entire life, they might actually be for real. Huge shout out to mothers everywhere, because my mom did all the work for this. So I did none of this, and I still got the citizenship. So absolutely big shout out to my mom. And so yeah, I would realize she'd probably have a lot of information on this, but now of course they've actually changed the law since she did it, and we're going to get into that. The biggest thing for this, and there's a couple different things you have to fall into, but essentially as a very brief way of explaining this, Italy, just like other countries for a while, I think Ireland famously, I know in the 90s and 2000s they were like, oh yeah, if you've ever been Irish, you can reclaim it. And now I think it's down to if you have a living grandparent, you can claim Irish citizenship. Otherwise you can't. So it's like, yeah, you have to be Irish.
If you have a living Irish grandparent.
Right.
Yes.
If any of your grandparents are alive, you could just become Irish. It's crazy. It's a crazy law. If you have a living Irish grandparent, yes, you can claim Irish citizenship. I think Poland has it really very similar to Italy's, which is kind of cool. If you're Polish, that was another option we were looking into, because my mother's father is Polish. That's who I look like. And we're like, oh, you can actually apply through Polish citizenship. But I mean, straight up, it was just like Poland or Ireland, Italy. So we decided on Italy because it was like, it's Italy. We got the Colosseum. And then, nothing else made sense. We couldn't do everything else was like, oh, that's not going to be possible. This was like in 2012, I want to say, 2013. I think my mom was getting interested in this. She was just like, oh, maybe it could be fun to do it to like live in Italy one day kind of thing. And it was. So I'm gonna mix in a lot of my own personal stories in this entire section of the podcast. I apologize. So yes, the essential thing is Italy considers you to be Italian if your ancestor, what I'm going to refer to as your direct line ancestor, which is the person directly in your family that you were related to that was Italian. And I say directly related to, I mean like grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, etc. You can't have like a great-great aunt or uncle, I don't think. And like, 'cause it's like it can't be that really. It has to be like you came from them, not
yes,
your cousin came from them kind of thing, if that makes sense. So it has to be your line. So your direct line ancestor, as long as they never renounced their Italian citizenship, they consider you Italian.
And I feel like that's the tricky part.
And it is the tricky part, and it makes sense on the surface. It makes a lot of sense on the surface. It's where you start digging that it makes a little bit less sense. So essentially, from here, I think there are essentially like 4 things that you have to check for, if that makes sense. The first thing and the most important thing is this person, your direct line ancestor, has to have been born after March 17th, 1861 in Italy, because that's when Italy became a country.
After. Okay.
And here's where this is where I start getting really annoyed with this thing. We've talked about this in the past, that before 1861, specifically March 17th, 1861, Italy was the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. It was the Kingdom of Milan, or the Italian Republic, I think, was in the north. You know, you had Venice doing something. It was like 4 different kingdoms all together, and then they got together, 4 different countries essentially, and they unified. And the reason I take umbrage with this fact is because and this is why it's really important. Again, we're going to repeat this, but it's really important to get a lawyer, because some websites and some law websites and some other sort of like genealogical websites state that your direct line ancestor has to have been born in Italy after March 17th, 1861. If you have a direct line ancestor, let's just say, that was born before March 17th, 1861, and then became Italian when it unified, and then left to go to the States, let's just say, or Argentina or wherever, they are not Italian. They were not born in Italy, so they were not a blood-right citizen themselves.
Which doesn't make any sense.
Which makes no sense, because I'm like, right,
because
so
they
what are
couldn't have been born into a country that didn't exist.
That didn't exist.
They were born on the land within the country became unified.
And where everybody was given Italian citizenship.
Right.
Even people not here were technically given Italian citizenship, because there's a lot of people who would have been like countryless, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
It's like people who didn't renounce their, let's say, Two Sicilies citizenship, but they were living somewhere else at the time, can't have just been a citizen of nowhere. It's like, no, you just became Italian. Okay, great. So I take umbrage with that fact, because I'm like, right, so everybody here became Italian, but basically it seems like the letter of the law states that if they were born after that date, they were born into Italy, then they can pass on the Italian citizenship. So for safety, that's what you look for. And that's not for everybody. I want to be clear. That's not a limiting factor for a lot of people, because this next one kind of makes it harder to fit into if you don't fit into that one kind of thing. So the first thing to look for is a direct line ancestor born after March 17th, 1861. I also want to throw in here too, if you're doing this process, the other reason to get a lawyer is because they will do all the genealogical stuff for you. And it's usually only a few grand. When I say few grand, I mean like 4 or 5 it used to be. And that would be the full package. That is you give us your information, your birth certificate, your birth date, and everything you might know, like your parents' birth certificates or whatever it is. And then we'll just use that and find it. Because essentially what they have to do is trace you back in the States, trace you ideally, let's say, to Ellis Island, if you came through Ellis Island, trace you back to your port of whoever, if they left from Naples, let's just say, trace you back to the port and the ship that took you there, and then try to figure out where they left from there. So they would have to find essentially there's a lot of the birth records are in churches, and they've been digitized, but in a way that essentially somebody just took photos of all the pages. So somebody still has to manually go through all the photos and try to figure out what lines up with you the best. And
sometimes people physically have to go to churches
Yes.
in the town if they can trace you back to a certain town. A genealogist might have to physically travel to that town and go to the mother church or different churches around, because they were the ones logging the births.
Yeah.
And not to mention, you have to look through all that old school cursive swoopy-doopy handwriting that's illegible these days.
Especially because it's all in Italian. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so it's a lot.
It's a lot. It's also, I want to also throw this out there too. Like, I'm very positive on this, and I really hope that if you're listening to this and you're even somewhat Italian, you're like, oh my God, I would love to do that. And it's amazing. I mean, it's phenomenal that this pathway is still open, especially because we're going to do a fun episode on Italian politics and safety in Italy and stuff like that later. But Italy tends to be in the last couple of years, they tend to be very anti-immigration of any type of immigration whatsoever. Not like, I think sometimes in the news is like, oh, but it's immigrants from here. No, it's like any type of immigration they are against on a political larger scale level. Like on a smaller level in terms of like people, not so much. People are like, yeah, we're literally a country of people who left. Mm-hmm. And then even before then, we're a country of people who came here. Like, I mean, like, because you could go back to ancient Rome. I think I've talked about this in something, was talking about this sort of Seneca, who was a aide at one point, not an aide, a advisor to Nero before Nero went crazy. Actually, Nero ended up killing him. But point is, he was the one who was arguing at Campania's for the weak and the soft. And I'm like, oh man, he's attacking us. But even he was talking about like, how can you be anti-immigration in Rome? He's like, Rome is literally created by immigrants. Like there's no national identity in Rome without immigrants. So just getting in this whole conversation, I realized, but my point is, Italy has always kind of known, it's always been people who leave or people who come. So it's a weird time now. So like a lot of the people on the street, I think, for lack of a better word, like on a very person-to-person basis, are, they're like, yeah, I either have, all my family has left Italy to become immigrants in another country, or no, I mean, that's not, or there's that. Most people has some family living abroad. And then, so nobody also really feels it's weird when people come to live here. Like, of course, that's just how things work.
And I think there is some regular human prejudice whenever when you're from a small town and then suddenly people show up who don't look like you. I think there very much is some prejudice. We can't deny that. But what we have seen is that by and large, people are pretty excited for new people to come into their town. Even if they're from a completely different country, don't speak the language, they're excited to share their culture with other people. Meanwhile, the government is much more negative on it.
I think that's fair. I think even where we're a town of like 1,000 people, I think, which is so funny. I'm just going to say, sorry, brief aside. We went to Matera the other day. We did the podcast on episode on Matera. As we were driving there, we stopped for coffee at this one little cafe. There was nothing else around. I mean, nothing, farmland for miles. One little building, cafe. We're chatting with them, or my mom's chatting with them. I'm just throwing in the odd word, and she was asking where they're from. They're like, oh, a super small town. There's only like 7,000 people. And I'm like, 7,000? That's huge. You guys live in a massive town. And then I think somebody else, we had lunch, there's this one of those communal tables, and we were sitting next to her, and she speaks English. And I think she was also saying, like, I come to high school in Matera because it's basically, my town's too small. It's like 4,000 or 5,000 people. And I was just like, oh my God.
Meaning there's no high school in her town.
Yeah, which is funny because there's a high school in our town and it's only 1,000 people. And of course, it's people from around this area come to high school here. It's very, I don't know. It's always weird because in the States, not in the States, but where we're from, there's like 4 or 5 high schools in a city. So it's just, you just go to the one that you're closest to. So it's always strange to be like, oh no, this is not one that anyone's close to. This is when people, drive for 45 minutes to get to because it's the science high school, not the, whatever. There's the other one, which is the hospitality.
Yes.
Thank you. So it's the one if you want to get into cooking and waiting tables and wine and things like that, you have that one, and this is a science one, and there's another one for other stuff. So all that being said, I just thought it was so funny because I'm like, I know we live in a small town, but it wasn't until other people describe a 7,000 person town as small that I'm like, oh my God, I think this is a really small town. And so which is all to say is yes, but it's also, we've seen how welcoming people tend to be, not just with us, but anybody who is literally not from this town, but also how suspicious people are of when people are from Italy, just not from this town. It's like there's so much more suspicion against somebody from Naples, for example, than there is against somebody from Syria or or Nigeria, because there's immigrants from both countries in this town, and there's so much more welcoming of them than they are of the people from Naples. And like, oh, Naples, and so it's just an interesting like, oh, so it's not a distance thing. It's just like if you don't know anything about the place, you're happy. If you know something about the place, you're like, oh no. So this has gone off the deep end. But this is all to say is I just wanted to kind of bring this into you that sometimes it feels like when you are applying for residency visas or when you are applying for citizenship, which we're talking about with the Birthright Citizenship, you can feel as if you are hitting your head against brick wall after brick wall after brick wall. And some of that is because the government on a national standpoint does not like immigration, but you can't be, they can't necessarily just stop immigration entirely because that's a very weird stance to take, especially because, there's not a country on earth that doesn't have like one Italian person. It's like an Irish, what is the Irish pub? There's an Irish pub in every country kind of thing. Same thing with Italian, like y'all are everywhere. So it's a little bit of a weird take all of a sudden. So that being said, it's as you start this process, if you do start this process, you might find that it feels like brick wall after brick wall. It is an incredibly understandable experience. It is one that so many people understand very well because even if they haven't gotten to that residency process or citizenship process, there are a lot of processes here that feel like hitting your head against a brick wall. And I will say too, just as a kind of to wrap this little point up, is we've talked about this before, but civil servants, especially the front-facing civil servants, for lack of a better word, are given a lot of leeway. So which is all to say, if somebody says no, that can't be done, you might just want to find somebody else. And I say that, because you're going to find that a lot with once you're in the process, especially once you're in the country, you're going to find that with doctors. Doctors get a lot of leeway in what they can and cannot do with treatments, with medicine, with this and that. And it's, people, and sometimes they have like, you have to sign up through them. So you get 80 or 100 patients. So you kind of like, you don't really get to go feel out your doctor. You kind of just have to find one that's close to you that is available, kind of thing. But the same thing with civil servants. Like sometimes you don't really get a choice if you're like, we're in a small town. There's one person who does what she does in the small town where I applied for citizenship. And she was very, very nice. She was about to retire. So she was like, I'm going to do this a little bit, not illegal, but it's going to be a little bit funky. And we're going to keep it that way. And
A
we're
little
going to keep
smushy.
A little squishy. Squishy?
I said smushy, but I like squishy.
A little bit smushy, a little bit squishy. It was because she's like, I'm going to retire soon and nobody's going to undo my work. And then, of course, the new guy comes in young and he's, desperate to impress, and he does everything by the book. And so this is all to say is like sometimes when you do something here, you'll notice that, some people are a lot more open to certain creative ways in getting something done than other people. And a lot of it is because there's so much leeway given to somebody. A lot of times civil servants at the, I guess say front facing, but it's the people you talk to in the city hall. It's the people you talk to at the immigration office. There's a lot of leeway given to them. And it's kind of also the way of like, I don't know, it seems like an interesting way of running the country in terms of it's not by the book, but it's like, if you are faced with somebody who has a very specific situation that we haven't written about, use your best judgment is kind of what it comes down to. So moving on with this, the first thing you need is somebody born after March 17th, 1861. The second thing you will need is if they naturalized before June 12th, 1912. So it's a pretty large window there in the sense of they have to be born after 1861, but they can't have naturalized before 1912. Naturalized just meaning
to their new country.
To their new country.
Okay.
And it's also a little bit fun. I mean, you can't naturalize to any country, so it's essentially they're saying to the first country they landed in, but it means ever at all kind of thing. So they word it in a very weird way that makes it seem like, but if you naturalize to a third country, you can do it. No, it's if they essentially by naturalize, it means renounced former citizenship and then accepted their new one, they can't pass it on.
Okay.
It's a little bit confusing because if they naturalize after that, they can.
That doesn't make any sense.
Welcome to my life. I'm trying to write an article on this and not lose my mind because I'm like, how does this make sense to anybody involved?
So if they were born after March 17th, 1961. 1861. But then they naturalized after
1912. Then
1912.
they're good. Then they can pass on the citizenship.
So if they're potentially like 100 years old, but they didn't, they don't have to be 100 years old.
40, 50, yeah.
Okay.
But essentially, so a lot of people were born after 1861 in the 90s, in the like 1890s.
In the 1890s.
Yeah, not the 1990s. Or the early 1900s.
Okay.
You can be born in Italy. And because there's a huge wave of immigration in the early 1900s, late 1800s, with, I think in the South specifically, there's a drought and a famine kind of thing, like sort of back to back. And I know even the town we are talked about, like the early 1900s, there's a huge wave of emigration, people leaving. And a lot of the South has not recovered from that. It's just a lot of people left and then never had a reason to come back. So it's super easy because you would have emigrated when you were 18, and then you might not have naturalized until you were 40 or 50, and that might not have been to the 1940s or 1950s. So for a lot of people, they're okay.
Okay, so if you've naturalized after 1912, then your children are still eligible for this blood right citizenship?
If they naturalized before, they are unable to transfer, even to children who were born before they're naturalized. So let's just say the grandfather, let's just say, naturalized in 1910, even though he had children that were living who, in theory, would still have had this Italian citizenship, they can't pass it on because he naturalized. It's a nightmare. It's a literal nightmare. I don't know who did this. And then, so the other big thing is obviously you must be in direct blood lineage to this person.
Lineage, yeah.
Lineage, yeah. What? Who pronounces lineage, man? Except me. The other thing that's a little bit difficult, a little bit questioning, because Italians love their dates, and they're like, "What can we? How would we complicate this?"
They love the paperwork.
They do. So, according to this, is actually funny too. It's only funny because we just learned of this quote that nobody really could explain the quote very well, but it's essentially like an Italian expression of the only thing you know for a fact is who their mother is, or something like that, or the only thing you'll ever know. The only
thing you can know about someone is who their mother is.
Yeah, or something like that. It's like because that's the only thing you could possibly know or the only thing
you can be sure about.
You could be sure about is who your mother is. It's something about like you can only be sure that somebody gave birth to you at some point. And we probably know who that person is because it's a very small town, I assume, is how it goes. But it's interesting because according to Italian nationality law, if an Italian woman was your ancestor and she was not born after 1948, she cannot pass on her citizenship because for years, like actual years, only the Italian man could pass on citizenship, not the Italian woman, which again only goes back to the thing about the, why not the person who gave birth to you?
The patriarchy.
Well, it's also like you also, because that's the other thing too. It's not even like we just talked about trying to hunt down this. Yes, definitely the patriarchy, but we're trying to hunt down this.
I don't need your validation on that point. It's okay. I know what it is.
I didn't want to gloss past that. No, but I was thinking even like hunting down your birth certificate, or not birth certificate, but these, as you go farther back and farther back, and also you're hoping for the fact there wasn't like a fire in the church that wiped out all chance of you ever having of applying for this. It would have been so much easier because it was like somebody saw somebody give birth and recorded it.
Right.
But instead of recording that person's name, you recorded the guy's
Some
name
dude
who
out in
might
the
not
hall.
have been in the,
Yes.
yeah. And it's like, what if, and there's like 18 Vincenzo Gasparis living in town. So you have to make sure it's the right, it's just a nightmare. It is a nightmare. So if she's born after January 1st, 1948, then citizenship can be granted. If she's born before January 1st, 1948, they cannot be granted. Darcy's looking confused.
I don't understand that.
So, but here's where it actually gets really interesting, because my mother applied through her mother. Not her mother. Her mother's very American. I love her. My grandmother was born before 1948. And so it does basically, so my mom went through her mother's side, my grandmother's side. And technically that's not allowed because
Anymore.
Well, that's the thing.
Or it wasn't allowed then.
It wasn't allowed then, which is like 10 years ago. Oh. And my mom actually talked to a lot of these genealogists, like, you shouldn't be able to do that. Interestingly, since I think it's 2009, this got so much, like, people were like, this is ridiculous that this is how this works. But since 2009, it's now basically done almost like case by case basis, but it still doesn't change the law. Nothing's really changed yet, but there's a lot of what are called 1948 cases, which essentially is even if, and so you listening, dear listener, if you're listening to this saying, well, dang, I know my grandma was born, like, she was born in America, but she was born in 1943, and her dad was born in Italy. You can still get the paperwork together, still do the whole process, still get it, still, pretend as if everything's normal, because there's so many cases that people are trying to get this overturned to just be like, there should be no 1948.
So essentially, if you get a lawyer, your lawyer can take that case to court, right? And say, Judge, hey, it was her mom. We both know this person should be Italian. Let's call it Italian.
Exactly. And that was the biggest, up until last year, that was one of the biggest things around this, is that it could not have been on they say the woman's side or the mother's side, however, in the sense of like, it might be your grandmother at that point, not your mom's side sort of thing. So if like, it was like basically like my grandmother's grandfather is how we were going through, I think. So, for me, it's like 8 generations. That's terrible math. 6 generations ago, 5 generations ago. So it's my mom's great grandfather, who was Italian, but it's because it was, related to her mother, who was born in like before 1948. That was it. There's no chance. And obviously she can go through her father. Her father's Polish. So for her, that should have ended there, but that's she went ahead and got the paperwork together. The lawyer helped, brought it to court. No problem. She's good.
Absolutely wild that could have been a problem.
Well, and it is a problem for so many people, and that's what a lot of people are like still, and that's why so many of these lawyer websites like still get the paperwork together, because you can absolutely fight this. This is not like a hard and fast thing. What is a hard and fast thing apparently now is a law change, and it changed, I think, in the October of 2024. It changed. So literally, this is 6 months old kind of thing. It used to be that, I'm going to give you an example. Let's say your grandparent, your grandfather, just to make this easy, because, Italian law and their patriarchy, your grandfather had children, and those children are born in 1913, 1914, whatever. And then he naturalized in 1915. Up until October of 2024, those children were Italians by birth, because he was Italian and he didn't give birth to anybody, but, the children were Italian because they got it from him. However, since October of 2024, if those children are not older than 18 by the time that person naturalizes, so their parent, your direct line ancestor, naturalizes, then the line has ended with that person who naturalized.
Who made the decision for the family to not be Italian anymore.
Which is a bit of an interesting thing, because again, there's an argument too that they were saying that some people were waiting to have children before naturalizing because you just want to make sure that citizenship has passed on. Right. And that was, for a lot of people, the intent. They're like, well, my kids are just born, they're 6 months old, but at least they're Italian now. They can always go back if they don't like their new life in New York or whatever it is. Right. Or Argentina or, Venezuela. I'm naming 3 of the big places Italians immigrated to. And that was, I think, the intent. So now that it's changed, it has closed so many doors because so many people did wait until just after having kids.
And there were so many people, like we know people who were modern day people who were in the process of getting their blood right citizenship. And this happened during their just before they put it, like entered in their paperwork or whatever.
We actually know one person who it's like literally up in the city hall right now. It was the woman who like just stamps it just hadn't gotten around to it basically, and then now it's like too late, and so she's like, now I can't stamp it. And this is actually, I will say again, where it goes back into the idea of there's a lot of leeway. She could in fact stamp it and say, you know what, this is already put through, I stamped it because it's a good faith thing. All the paperwork that was done, it was already done essentially.
It's been sitting on my desk
exactly since June, I think, of 2024. So there's no reason I shouldn't stamp it, kind of thing. This is something that's also being fought because now it's the person cannot have naturalized after 1912. They have to be older than 18. Their parent could not have naturalized before they were 18. And this your mother or grandmother or whoever it is could not have been born before 19. It becomes super limiting. And that's kind of what a lot of people are getting angry about. They're like, and again, some of it too is, I will say, like, not to defend Italy at all. Italy can defend itself. It's a country. But there are a lot of people who do claim their citizenship and then immediately leave again and use it as like a back pocket thing. Like, I'd like to have it just in case, or you can pass it on to your children. So that's a big thing. Or if you're married, you can, after 5 years of being married to an Italian, they can apply for Italian citizenship as well. So that's another thing, by the way, of those of you listening, if you are married, it's not an immediate thing that your partner does not automatically get Italian citizenship either. They have to then be married to you from 5 years from the day in which you become an Italian citizen. So, which again, it gets confusing because it's like Italy on one hand argues that you're always an Italian citizen, you're just proving that you are. And the other hand says, yeah, but like if you got married before you actually had paperwork proving it, we're going to ignore all those years of marriage up until until afterwards. It gets nightmarish. That's not even the complicated part, y'all. Okay, that is the easy. Let's just say you fit all these brackets. I don't even know what the brackets are anymore. But after 1861, somebody was born. They did not naturalize before 1912. They naturalized afterwards. Their children were older than 18, so they passed on to next in line. And let's just ignore the 1948 case because let's say, honest, you can argue that in court. So let's say you fit this. You are like basically Italian. Like your great-grandfather was 19 when his grandfather or grandmother became naturalized American or naturalized Argentinian or naturalized Australian or whatever it is. You're good. What do? First step is get your birth certificate. Get your parents' birth certificate. Get your, whoever is related to that person, your direct line, get their parents' certificate. You also need death certificates. You need every birth and death certificate in line up to your direct ancestor, and not necessarily, it's basically to when that person was born in Italy. So again, I think like it's one of those things where now that this 18-year-old rule thing makes it complicated because you still need that person's parents' birth certificate. So essentially you're going to have to find somebody's birth certificate in Italy to make this a thing. It does help, again, all these manifest records. And I say like a big shout out to my mom. She did a lot of this by herself. She was like, it did free time kind of thing. It took like a year and a half, 2 years until she finally, one, hired a lawyer, and two, actually, funny enough, she was living in a different town and came to the town in which we currently live because there's a genealogical museum here, and talked to the guy and just like, on the off chance. And within like a couple of days, he'd found the name and he found the birth certificate. So that was, kind of a funny little way to meet this person who's now a friend. And so you need all the paperwork. You need also technically too, if just in case you are married and divorced, you technically need both your marriage certificate and your divorce certificate. But there's not like a reason as to why.
Yeah, I don't get that one.
Or it's actually, that's the other funny thing. Again, this is where it gets nightmarish. My name in America, United States, is Nathaniel Faro Mellor. Faro is my middle name. Please don't steal my identity, y'all. Just for what it's worth.
What's your social security number?
I know, right?
I'm just kidding.
So that's my name in America. When I filled out paperwork in this country, I didn't know where to put my middle name, so I just gave my middle initial. So it's Nathaniel F. Mellor. And now my name is Nathaniel F. Mellor. Officially, there's no, I'll put Faro in, and they're like, we don't recognize that. And I'm like, what about just the F? And they're like, oh yeah, we get the F. But on some documents, it's Nathaniel F. Mellor.
Sorry.
And I'm like, I mean, I guess that you could think that's a name, but why would you put the F attached to Nathaniel? Because it wasn't
No one
attached.
here can say your name anyway.
But everybody has like 16 middle names. So
Yes.
everybody has 16 middle names, and nobody has a place to put a middle name on a box. So I just put it next to the Nathaniel. And I didn't put the whole name. I didn't think about that. So I just did it. It's like 10 years ago. It's way too much effort now to change it. But I just know that I recently tried to sign up for this thing through the post office. And they're like, that's not your name. That's not your name. I'm like, how is my name wrong? And then I'm like, oh my God, it's Nathaniel F. And people still, if I haven't met them at like the, if I go to the doctor or something like that, Nathaniel Fmelor. And I'm like, oh, this will be a good visit. So yeah, I guess this is all to say that there's no real double checking work here. And then, I don't know, just make sure that when you put your name in, you spell it properly, I guess, because they're not gonna like say like, can you show me your like license or another piece of paperwork that says this is your name? You could just
even though the government has copies of your birth certificate
Wild
with
to
your
me.
full name on it. Yeah.
Wild to me. So it's also too, couldn't figure out I mean, my mom was very curious about this. She wants to change her name in Italy, but not in the States. And she's not sure she's allowed to do that. Not for anything like.
Just for fun.
Just for fun.
To have
Yeah.
a
She's
name
like,
that
"But
she
can
really
you do-"
identifies with.
Like
Yeah.
in Italy specifically. So anyway, totally getting off topic. I apologize. But the point is, yes. So if you are somebody who's divorced or married and then divorced and you have kids, it's a whole thing. You don't actually, I don't think actually need there's nothing about that. It just is more paperwork and more money for no reason. Which brings us to the second point of all of this will need to be translated into Italian. You can't just do it with Google Translate. You need somebody who...
You need a certified
You
translator.
need a certified translator. It's usually about 100 euros per page. It does not matter if there's 3 words on the page. It's usually about 100 euros per page. Once this is all translated, you need it apostilled, which just means you need to send it to the embassy apostilles it, and they send it back. Here's what gets really confusing, though, because this has not been confusing enough up to this point. You can get it translated and then apostilled. And then some people will send it back to you saying, no, we need the apostille translated. And you'll do that. And they say, okay, but this translation, the apostille, isn't apostilled. And you're like, yeah, because if I apostille a translation of the apostille.
Isn't apostille just like what the notary does? They they look at it, they put a stamp on it.
Well, there's also a piece of paper that they stamp to it and they attach to it. It's a whole thing, and they need apostilled. So again, my mother, I love her, great lady. She's not like dead or anything. I should be very clear about this. I'm speaking of her as if she's like
she's just down the street.
Down the street,
Yeah.
and pour one out. But I'm like, pour one in her cup because she would like to drink it. And so she was going on and on with, again, this lovely woman who worked at the comune, the city hall, who was essentially saying, I can't accept this paperwork because you need the apostille translated. And mom's like, I can't translate the apostille because then I'm going to be back here and you're going to tell me that I need the translation of the apostille apostilled. And then I feel like I'm caught in a cycle where I'm paying $100 for this and $3.50 for the apostille, which is not that much, but still $3.50 for in a cycle that does not end. Mm-hmm. So finally, she was able to explain that, trust me, I have not touched this is from the consulate in America. This is not like, I did not do the apostilling. And because also they stamp it with a thing, and some states, like in Georgia, it's just like a little stamp. I think other states have like a foil stamp, and some of them have like a little ribbon they attach to it. It's a whole thing. I mean, it's a very certified looking document. So you need this all translated, and then you need all of it apostilled. And then you are ready. You can fill out your application and you submit it. There are 2 ways to do this. The first way is to do it through your consulate. I mentioned this on the article that I will put in the description, and because I mentioned this in a few different ways, but your consulate might not be where you think it is. Your Italian consulate, I should be clear. There are only like 7 in the States. And for instance, we're from Georgia. Ours is in Miami, because Miami's consulate serves pretty much all of Southeast Georgia. There's like, I think 6 Italians living in all of Southeast Georgia that's not, Florida, or live in all the Southeast that's not Florida. So I think they're sort of like, yeah, we don't need that many. I think New York's like serves just New York or something. I have no idea. But essentially, because there's Boston, which is for the entire Northeast. And so essentially yours might be a couple states away. Your first option is to send this to them. They will give you a date in which it'll be in front of a judge. And then when the judge looks at it, make sure it's all there, signs a little piece of paperwork and says, congratulations, you're Italian now. Welcome to the country. In 2015, roughly November of 2015, the wait times, for example, I think of the San Francisco, and I only know this because we were looking into it. My mom was looking into this before coming to Italy. The wait times of the San Francisco consulate went from like 2 years for your appointment to like 16 years, because all of a sudden...
I thought that jump happened in 2016.
It might have.
Okay.
Between the election at the end of 2015 and then the inauguration at the beginning of 2016.
Right, okay.
And there's a huge jump. Same thing with New York. It went from a couple of years to like a decade and a half. And I mean, that's kind of impossible. Because essentially there's a few judges, so it was just like, this is insane. Part of this is also because one thing that people were passing around was that you don't actually need all the paperwork before you get the appointment. You can go ahead and apply, and all you need is all your paperwork by the time your appointment rolls around. So it does make it a little confusing because a lot of people were just applying to get their name on the list, and then they're like, I have 10 years now to get the paperwork together to become Italian if I need to. And if I don't, I just miss the appointment. It's no big deal. But, it obviously clogs up the system for everybody else, because for a while, people would get the paperwork together first because it could take 2 years to get the paperwork together. The other option, the much easier option, in my opinion, is you come to Italy, believe it or not. Every town can do it. And there's a questura, which is an immigration office for every, not just region, but every province has their own immigration office, which is where we go for Darcy's paperwork. But even in the town, like we're in a town currently now, that you can apply like to be a temporary resident of this town, and you go through the town hall here, and there's no waiting list because there's like one person who applies every 6 months kind of thing, and you basically go through the entire process in Italy. It takes usually about 2 to 3 months. And there are services, again, we talked to these lawyers, there are all their genealogical services. Normally we'd put our friend's link in the description, not because, we want to give our friend business, but just because he did this whole process of, he would find your, say, ancestors, and then for more money, he would basically say, he had apartments set up that you could, that were all above board in terms of you had a permit to use the apartment for the 3 months while you were here applying for your citizenship. That way you can also go to the cities and get the paperwork in person, the whole 9 yards. He stopped doing that, unfortunately, but there are other services essentially that are set up to be, you pay us money and we will find all the paperwork you need, and then we will go with you to the immigration office. We will talk to the people in person, we'll apply, and then when you're done, what you'll do is you become an Italian citizen. And then you register as an Italian living abroad with a program called AIRE, and that's just the sort of Italian living abroad program. So if you go back to Australia or the United States or England or Canada, wherever, then you just register with this program. As far as I'm aware, America, I believe, is one of only 3 countries that charges you tax based on your citizenship and not based on where you live.
The U.S. specifically?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, the U.S. specifically. So there are no tax implications. It's not like once you become an Italian citizen, you still have to pay income tax. Again, I say that because for America, it doesn't matter where you live. You still have to pay, I think it's like income tax and a few other things, unless there's an agreement but even if you sell a house, I know this is silly, but I don't know anything about Boris Johnson except for the fact that he was born in America. So he's technically, to English parents, but I think he's technically American, and he sold a house, and he's like, the IRS came calling because they wanted their cut of the house sale, and he's like, I've never lived in America.
He sold a house in the UK.
He sold a house in the UK.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it was this whole thing, and he was trying to renounce it, but it was part of a story about how that this is like 3 or 4 years ago, during COVID, a lot of people were, again, getting around to things, I guess, because they had time on their hands, were renouncing their American citizenship, namely people who had either never lived in the States, like their parents passed down their American citizenship to them or something like that. Because again, it's a benefit, but also means you're paying taxes. Even if you've never been set foot in the country, you're still paying taxes to America.
Because the U.S. system is broken.
So it's I'm laughing and smiling, by the way. I'm not ignoring that. And so it's just, anyway, this is also simply to say there's no tax implications for Italy, I don't believe. At least, not that I have found.
Okay.
So that, I think, pretty much wraps it up.
I have one question. So,
please.
Because your mom did all the work and put your birth certificate, translated and all this information in with hers, you were able to get citizenship through her.
Yes. Okay. Good question.
It is still possible, right, for a parent to apply for their blood right citizenship and then bring their children with them on that citizenship if they're under 18, over 18? Do you know how that works?
I do. That is a great question. So when my mom did this is back in, again, she started the process in like 2012, 2013, and I think she finally submitted the paperwork in early 2015 because she was already living in Italy at the time, and she was like, it's so much simpler. Not living in Italy, she was like visiting, and she was like, oh, I could just do that while I'm here visiting. I'm visiting for 3 months. That 3 month stay ended up being like a 4-year stay because of the whole thing. Crazy. But the point is, it was for, again, this moment, this genuinely brief moment, this ending as she was arriving, was that when she was applying, she could put up to 10 people on that application. So herself,
who were related to her,
but specifically to that bloodline ancestor.
Yeah, not like me. Not like a random person.
I'm sorry. No. So 10 people who were related to that same bloodline ancestor. So for her, it was a great-great-grandfather or great-grandfather. So it was brothers or cousins that were related to that great-grandfather, or nieces and nephews, her children, me and my brother, who were both over 18 at the time, we were all on board. None of these putzes wanted to become Italian. They were like, no, we'll do it later. It's not a big deal. We can always do this again. My mom was like, I just want to be clear. Like, this is kind of like it's going, gone. Like, once it's gone, because they're basically, Italy will take your paperwork and then feed it to a dog who will then just make that paperwork disappear. And you can never get it again. So it's ridiculous. I don't understand. It's like, there's no system in which...
No shade to dogs.
No shade to dogs.
Shade to Italy, maybe.
100% to Italy. There's like my brother, for instance. He and I are brothers. 100%. I'm pretty sure. At least 90%.
You definitely are.
But he cannot apply the same way I did, because it's like that, all that paperwork that my mom did is gone now. They're like, oh, no, you want to apply, you go through the exact same paperwork again. And of course we can have copies of it, but it still needs to all be translated again. It doesn't matter if it's ours. No. Go translate it again. It's
all in a drawer somewhere. They're never going to find it again.
And then apostille it again, fill out another application, and then you can submit it to us. So at the time, again, this is, I want to say early 2015, she was trying to get everybody on board. Nobody really wanted to be on board. She's like, fine. I was on board. I was like, yeah, this sounds awesome. Put my name down. Absolutely. I'll come. She's like, well, yeah, I'm going to live. I didn't get my little citizenship card until I was like 2019, I think. So it took about 4 years. Not because there was like other things involved as well. There was like another piece of paperwork that was missing. And then this whole Nathaniel F. Mellor thing came up. It was a whole disaster. Oh my God. So, but it all to say, yes, that used to be. Now it has changed. So if you're applying, dear listener, and your children are under 18, they're good. If your children are over 18, they are not good. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, they will have to go through the exact same process. It's like
with duplicate paperwork, essentially?
With duplicate paperwork, including but not limited to, and then essentially they will need their own birth certificate, obviously, proving their relationship to you, if you're applying for yourself. So it's a little bit annoying, because there's no way to basically say like I could not now, if I wanted to apply now, I could not say, right, but my mom is Italian.
She already did all that stuff.
No, not even that.
Italian.
But she's Italian. Yeah. How like
she is a citizen. I am her child.
Exactly, and
therefore I am a citizen. No,
and a part of it is I was not born when she was already Italian, so it doesn't pass to me. And part of it, I'm like, right, but she proved that she never lost her Italian citizenship, and if she never lost it, and she never gave it away in the meantime, in the interim, mm-hmm. could I not then just approve them related to her? And they're like, no, you have to go through the exact same process and prove that you're related to whoever the direct line. And part of it too is potentially easier because, again, my mom, for example, if they had closed the door and that 1948 thing was definitely a hard no, which it isn't, it's a very soft yes, then she never could have gotten Italian citizenship, but I possibly could have gotten it through my father, whose mother is also Italian. A lot of Italians in New York, apparently. So that would have been another door open. But again, obviously I could not give it to like my parents or something like that. So it's one of those funky little things. And then for you and I, we got married, 2019? Mm-hmm. So now, I mean, and it's a little bit easier too. Again, if you are genuinely thinking about coming to live in Italy and you are either married or planning on getting married or one of the two, or maybe there's a third option I'm not thinking about. If you are married in the States, you need to be married 5 years before your spouse can apply for citizenship. If you're in Italy, it's 2 years, I believe, and then they can apply for citizenship. If you have a child, it's 1 year. So, cool. And honestly, like if you guys are married, if you're listening, if you're married and you have a kid, 1 year is going to pass by the time you know it, because that's how long the paperwork takes to apply for and all that kind of stuff. So once you've done that, you're like, this is now, essentially, because I'm thinking like your permesso, your residency card, mm-hmm. you applied for it back in February because it expired in September, and they gave you an appointment to renew it in April of this year. Mm-hmm. So it was like but now we because how it works, apparently it's not, this new residency permit is not good from when it expired last. It's good from when you applied for it last.
Right.
So it's already a year old.
Yes.
It's only ever going to last another year. So you have to already go ahead and apply to renew it, because it's going to take 13 months to get another appointment. It's a whole thing. So all that being said is, yes, if your kids are under 18, they can come along with you. If they are over 18, they cannot. They have to do the entire process by themselves. Same thing if you have siblings who are all related, they have to do the entire process separately. It could be separate but together. Again, once you find like the one piece of paperwork you need, you can make 3 copies of it, translate it, and apostille it, but it has to be 3 separate applications. It cannot be one application.
Okay.
A nightmare.
Wow. One thing that you did mention that I'm not going to go into, but I think we should do an episode on it, is you mentioned that if you're married in the U.S. versus if you're married in Italy, if you are a U.S. citizen, I highly recommend you getting married, or at least getting your marriage
Oh, yeah.
certificate in the US. It's so complicated
Don't do it in
here.
Italy.
They like do that old school thing where they put your name in the paper and people can be like, I object to their marriage. It's a whole thing.
It's also, you need so much more paperwork to get
Yes.
married here. Not just, I mean, you need to bring birth certificates over. You need to bring
And there's the waiting period.
and a
there's,
statement saying you've never been married before and that nobody in the States protests or objects to your marriage. It's
people should not be able to protest and object to your marriage. But also, same-sex relationships here, when they are at the level of marriage, let's say, meaning like you're not just dating or whatever, are different here on paper than they are in the US. Like obviously now in the US, thank goodness we have same-sex marriage. Amazing. Here, it is different, right? It's like you have I'm trying to say coupling. What's the word? Like you and I were looking into not getting married, but being
No, it's just a long-term partner.
Okay, thank you.
And it's worded, and again, this is where it goes back to, I keep going back to this. It keeps going back to the idea of civil servants have a lot of pull. And everybody knows it was one of those wink, wink, nudge, nudge rules where it's only for long-term partners. Nowhere in this does it say those long-term partners must be same sex. It just says long-term partners. Makes sense. Super easy. And like you and I, it's like you have to prove you've been together for at least 5 years, I think was what it was. And it was like, yeah, we have photos together from 5 years ago. We have photos together from 9 years ago, whatever it was.
Yeah, this is before we were married. We were like, yeah, we're partners. We've been partners for a long time.
Yeah.
They were like, guys, no, that's not what this means.
And that was the thing. It was like, then nobody will tell you that until you try to apply for it. And they're like, that's not for you. And we're like, oh, because obviously if you're same sex, you can't get married in Italy because I'm 95% sure that like all marriages are done in the Catholic Church in Italy. There's like, because marriage is a
Again, I
religious
really
thing.
want to do an episode on this, but we need to do more research.
Because I think even in the States, I guess you can get married, but even for a while you could have a civil partnership that was recognized by the state, it just or the country or whatever it was. You couldn't get married in a church kind of thing. But here it's like, I don't know if the Catholic Church is going to change it anytime soon. So it's a little bit like, where are you going to get married if not in a Catholic? I don't know. It's a whole thing, because you still need to register with a thing. But you can, I think you can get it registered with a comune, with like a town hall, city hall. So yes, but even it doesn't matter how this breaks down. So much easier to get married in the States. And we actually know somebody who got married in Utah, I want to say. They did a Zoom marriage to somebody in Utah because that was where you didn't have to be a resident, I think. I think it was Utah. It might have been somewhere else. But it's some state you don't have to be a resident of to get married in because they were here and they didn't want to go back because they couldn't do a Zoom marriage like in Georgia because one of them's Italian, one of them's American. And they're like, oh, we'll do the long-term partnership thing. And they ran into the exact same things we ran into, which is essentially, no, it's not for you. So then they got married, I think, in a Utah Zoom call or something. Amazing. I don't know if the entire state of Utah was there. I don't know how that worked. And so, yes, that is actually something mentioned seriously, genuinely. I think a lot of those people who are like, oh, we got married in Italy. No, you got married in the States. You came to Italy.
We have a friend of a friend who did what's it called?
Ceremony?
But when you do a travel, everybody travels for your wedding.
Oh, destination wedding?
Destination. Thank you. I'm like, an exhibition wedding? That doesn't make sense. A destination wedding. And they were going to do the whole process here in Italy until they realized how complicated it was.
Oh, yeah.
And so they just got the marriage certificate and were kind of officially married, I think at a courthouse essentially. But then in front of all their friends and family, they were married in Italy.
And that's just, I know this is going on long, but that is something that's big just for most of these. But yeah, it's just essentially, if you just get married in the States, you need a marriage certificate. You need to be translated in apostille. It's very simple. There's like 19 pieces of paperwork that all need to be translated, all need to be apostilled for getting married in Italy. It's a nightmare. I don't recommend doing it. And it does not make your process any easier. So if you're going to go through the citizenship process or any of these residency visa processes, honestly, and I mean, specifically, but not limited to, if you're like, if you have a long-term partner and you're like, it's easier to get married in the States if you want to bring them over because a lot of these family reunification visas is what it would be called if you're a student or if you're a elective resident or anything like that where you're trying to bring a spouse over. They almost all of them, at least on the Questora, the immigration website, it's very specifically spouse. It's not long-term partner. So I think you have to be married to somebody to bring them over. And there, again, it's part of it's like kind of the, please don't bring over 40 people that you happen to be slightly related to. It's bring over your family unit kind of thing.
Person,
yeah. So if it's your children, but children that are not adults, if it's your partner, but you have to be married, if it's your parents, but it's have to be people who rely on you. It's not just like bring over, everybody else kind of thing. So yeah, that's just something to kind of keep in mind is like, if any of these things appeal to you and you want to bring over a partner, it might help to get married. Even you and I were not going to, we were going to be together, but we weren't planning on getting married. This is such a pain.
Yep.
And then we're like, well, it's actually going to be the easiest way to make this happen. So I think that is everything. I think if that's, that's all I have.
Very informative.
That's all I have. And this will all be for those of you who are like, okay, there's too many dates and I need like a Tylenol after this or whatever, ibuprofen. I don't want to drop like brand names into this.
A nice herbal tea.
A nice herbal tea.
Or a cocktail.
Or a walk. A
That's
cocktail.
very nice.
Or alcohol. Then you can absolutely instead find an article on this that has no walks, cocktails, or Tylenols, but it at least has the dates listed out for you. And I think at a certain point in the article, you'll see that I'm also losing my mind writing it, trying to break it down in simpler and simpler terms and be like, I don't know what the timeline is here, but essentially here it is. And and as you mentioned, as a last note, I would say it doesn't matter how young you are. And I would say that too, because people who are younger than us in their early 20s are like, I can't afford a lawyer. I would still like just reach out to lawyers if this is interesting to you, because it might be something you actually can't afford. Again, it used to be kind of a flat rate between $4,000 or $5,000 for them to do the entire process for you, which included the translations. I don't know if it's changed since then. I mean, things have gotten expensive, so I have no idea how expensive, but that could be a totally valid option, because if you are young and nobody else in your family is interested in this, but you know for a fact that you have like an Italian grandparent or great grandparent, it's definitely a way that you can reclaim that citizenship.
Absolutely.
So, all right. I think that's everything.
I think that was good.
An hour and 20 minutes. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to leave us a review, you can do so on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. I think that's the only places we're on that accept reviews. If you'd like to leave us a question, a comment, you can also, you can send us a message on both Instagram, Only a Bag Podcast, as well as Blue Sky, Only a Bag. You can also just leave a comment on Spotify. I never considered this. You can leave a comment on Spotify if you'd like, and we can answer it. If you feel like it's weirdly broaching of a relationship to like message us directly. However, please don't do that on Apple, because if you leave a review on Apple, we cannot respond to it. So if there's a question in that review, we cannot respond to it, and we have no way of finding you and answering it.
Right.
So
you're just putting that into the void.
Exactly. And yeah, we also have a website, onlyabag.com, in which you will find this article. As soon
that
as
might be the best place to contact us as well. It's onlyabag.com.
So thank you all so much. And if you would like to support us financially, you can find our coffee as well.
I think that's good. I need a nap now. That was a great, very informative episode.
Thank you all so much for listening.
Thanks for listening. Tanti abbracci.